She only meant to offer a stranger a drink. One counted breath moment, a glimmer of courtesy shaped by long habit, and the world she'd stitched together with quiet resolve tore open like damp paper. Within 30 minutes, she was backlit by the frosted glass of a human resources office, her name erased from the schedule with the wipe of a red felt tip. 72 hours later, her telephone rattled like an alarm clock that refused to quit. Tabloid reporters, radio hosts, producers who spoke in exclamation points, each demanding a salacious angle she did not possess. Before the week was over, a steward in an immaculate uniform guided her, still stunned, through the cabin of a Gulf Stream where the hum of engines smothered every coherent thought. 12 months on, talk show monologues, late-night punchlines, and city bus billboards repeated her name with the insistence of a hymn. Yet the tale they shouted was never hers. What happened that ordinary November evening in Atlanta was not a rags-to-riches fable, not a lottery ticket punched by destiny, but a crossroads that demanded something fiercer than luck. It was the story of an exhausted mother who had already learned the price of dignity. A superstar who longed, just for a breath, to be unseen, and the irrevocable choice that bound their fates. Listen closely. Amid the flashbulbs and the noise, you will hear the softer pulse of a question older than applause. What is a life truly worth when the cost of kindness is everything you thought unbreakable? The overhead chandeliers of the Ritz-Carlton's lobby in Atlanta shimmered like 1,000 patient fireflies, their light diffused by swirls of tobacco-colored crystal that made evening feel perpetually on the cusp of dusk. Yvonne Harper adjusted the starched collar of her burgundy jacket, exhaled against the tug of a migraine that had begun behind her temples at dawn, and crossed the marble in measured steps that housekeeping manuals called the ghost walk. Silent, frictionless, invisible. Her shift had started 12 hours earlier. The same morning, her 7-year-old Lena woke feverish and glassy-eyed. No substitutes were available, the supervisor had said. Sick pay was for full-timers. So Yvonne whispered a nursery rhyme, set out a thermos of ginger tea at the bedside for her neighbor to monitor, and rode the 5 p.m. bus downtown, praying the driver would keep the heater on so Lena could borrow the warmth through imagination. Now, at 11:27 p.m., the VIP lounge was almost empty. A pair of record label executives argued softly over a faxed contract, their loosened silk ties reflecting the bar's blue neon. Beyond them, a young couple in sequined sports jackets dozed in armchairs, tickets for a new edition concert folded like origami cranes in their pockets. The air smelled of cedar polish, bergamot cologne, and the vague electricity of too many televisions left on mute. Yvonne stacked polished glasses on a rubber mat, glancing up as the mirrored door eased inward. A lone figure slipped through, hood drawn, head bent, steps feather-light, despite the weight of black boots that must have cost more than her month's rent. Security had cleared him somewhere along a back corridor. She saw the telltale adhesive wristband flash silver inside his sleeve. But neither of the guards who usually flanked VIP entries accompanied him. The stranger's posture radiated the practiced shrinkage of someone accustomed to shrinking only by choice. He paused inches from the bar. Under the hood, his face was paler than expected, moonlit even beneath amber bulbs, the jawline arrow-sharp yet soft around the mouth. And the eyes, if spotlights could ache, they would look like that. Dark, reflective, carrying rumors of sleepless miles. "Water," he said, voice just above a whisper, gloved fingers tapping once on the lacquered surface. "No ice. Please." Polite, almost shy. Yvonne's training insisted she avert her gaze. The rule was service without acknowledgement of identity. But some instinct older than protocol urged a second, fuller look. The cheekbones, the slight quaver after consonants, the single curl escaping the hood, every grain of childhood radio and television resolved into certainty. Michael Jackson stood 3 feet away, asking for the simplest element on earth as if requesting sanctuary. She retrieved a crystal tumbler from the top shelf, rinsed it, dried it twice. Her hands did not shake. Years of balancing soup tureens in ballroom corridors had taught her serenity under scrutiny. While the faucet ran, she risked conversation, pitched low. "We're almost out of quiet corners these days, aren't we?" His head tilted, surprised by the normalcy of the remark. "Quiet," he echoed, as though tasting the syllable. "That's rare." She slid the glass across, no garnish, no straw, exactly level with his reach. "I grew up in Macon," she offered, filling the silence. "My brother used to lift the radio antenna with a broom handle just to catch WQXI late at night. Ben was the first record we both knew by heart." Michael's lips curved, tentative, genuine. "You still listening?" "Every day," she nodded. "But some songs, they sound harder when you're grown." He sipped, eyes closing for one heartbeat. Steam from the espresso machine sighed in the background. December tour dates, lawsuits, and gossip columns fell away. In their place hovered 2 tired humans speaking across the fragile bridge of a shared memory. "People think the spotlight is heat," he murmured, setting the glass down so gently it made no ring on the coaster. "Truth is, it's glass. You press your hands, you leave prints everyone can measure." Yvonne folded her polishing cloth and rested both palms on the bar. "Glass cuts, too." A low laugh escaped him, startled, relieved. It lingered in the stillness like perfume. 3 minutes stretched elastic and sweet, punctuated only by the clink of the executive's ice cubes and the distant bell of an arriving elevator. Then a door at the rear swung wide. Gerald McKay, evening manager, strode in, clipboard underarm, expression honed from years of escorting celebrities through side entrances. His eyes darted to Michael, widened, then fixed on Yvonne with the precision of a scope. "Sir, your private suite is ready," he announced, voice dipped in obsequious concern. To Yvonne he added scarcely above a hiss, "You, step out." Michael straightened, but Yvonne had already begun the involuntary retreat. The code was unspoken. Staff vanish, guests glide. She offered a nod, collected the bar towel, and slipped through the service door without allowing her shoulders to slump. Behind her, she caught one last fragment of conversation, the singer asking, "Was she not supposed to speak?" before the corridor swallowed the words. 10 minutes later, summoned to the administrative office, she stood beneath fluorescent tubes that hummed like hornets. Gerald paced in front of a framed mission statement, celebrating excellence in discretion. "We do not engage guests unless invited," he recited. "We do not prolong exchanges. You know this." "I served water," she replied. It felt insufficient, yet entirely true. "And conversed," he shot back. "Your locker will be emptied. Security will escort you off premises." A single breath, rough, metallic, caught in her chest. She thought of Lena, asleep with a damp cloth on her forehead. She thought of rent, due in 6 days. She thought of how a man who sold out stadiums worldwide had found a moment's steadiness in an unnoticed corner, and how that human moment was the very thing her uniform forbade. Outside, the lobby's chandeliers continued their patient shimmer. No guest glanced at the woman in the burgundy jacket as she crossed the marble for the last time, name tag already pocketed, dignity threaded through her spine like piano wire. The November night slid cold against the revolving door. Somewhere behind her, applause for the unseen show of wealth and fame rolled on. But Yvonne Harper stepped into the dark, with only the muffled echo of that unguarded laugh to light her way. The dawn that followed felt counterfeit, as though the sun had overslept and sent a weaker apprentice in its place. Gray daylight seeped through the kitchen blinds, drawing pale bars across the linoleum, and Yvonne Harper lingered beside the stove counting heartbeats she had once counted in tips. A single slice of white bread browned inside the toaster. Breakfast trimmed to what Lena's upset stomach could manage. And the hiss of the burner reminded Yvonne of distant ocean surf, a noise that should have soothed if it did not carry undertow. Lena padded in wearing a flannel nightgown dotted with cartoon suns. Fever had left her voice ragged but eager. "Mama, you're home early." Yvonne knelt until their eyes shared level ground. Behind the child's pupils shone equal parts relief and question. Children laced comfort with interrogation, better than most attorneys. "Sweetheart, I'm going to be home a while," she said, smoothing a curl from Lena's cheek. "The hotel and we decided I won't work there anymore." "Did you quit?" The words slipped out proud, as if resignation sounded heroic. "Something like that." Yvonne tried for steadiness, and realized only later she'd been wringing the dish towel. "It means I can sit with you when you feel lousy. It means I'll hear those radio dramas you like instead of guessing how they end." Lena processed this new geometry of time. "Can we finish the puzzle today? The one with the lighthouse?" "We can finish anything you want." That, at least, was truth. The toaster snapped. Yvonne buttered the bread with deliberate gentleness. Small rituals guarded sanity, but her gaze drifted toward the beige rotary phone mounted beside the pantry. A call had to be made before courage dissolved. She kissed Lena's forehead, sent her to the sofa with toast and a fleece blanket, then dialed the Ritz-Carlton's administrative extension from memory. 2 rings. "Staff scheduling," announced a brittle soprano. "This is Yvonne Harper. The sentence felt like lifting luggage long after muscles failed. "I'd like to confirm my next shift and arrange to collect my personal items." Pause. Keyboard clatter. The voice returned, clipped. "Your name is no longer on the roster. Human Resources advises terminated employees to submit a written request for property retrieval. Access to back-of-house lockers is restricted. I only need the key fob and a paperback, nothing of hotel property. Policy applies." Click. The dial tone sounded hollow, like wind through an empty Coke bottle. Yvonne replaced the receiver, leaning her forehead against cool enamel. A sharper woman might have shouted, demanded fairness, threatened legal recourse, but indignation required reserves of energy she was busy spending on composure. A knock rapped the screen door, 3 brisk taps. Ruby Whitfield, neighbor and veteran of every city protest since '68, stepped in without waiting. She carried a mason jar of broth, and the day's Atlanta Journal-Constitution rolled like a baton. "Girl, the street's talking." Ruby's eyebrows arched high enough to fault the ceiling. "You thinking of letting them push you out the side door and stay silent?" Yvonne managed a tired smile. "I'm thinking of keeping my daughter fed." The public loves a David and Goliath story. Call a reporter. Explain how they dumped you for treating that man like a person. Shame sells papers. Ruby unfolded the journal to the classifieds, circled advertisement spaces with a ballpoint. "They'll pay for a statement, maybe more than the tips you lost." "It was a moment, not a movement," Yvonne answered. "Let it pass." Ruby opened her mouth, closed it, then set the jar gently on the counter. "Anything you need, holler." Beneath the brass of her reproach was velvet concern. She left a hint of lilac perfume swirling in her wake. Silence reoccupied the house, thick enough to muffle the ticking wall clock. Yvonne filled a basin with lukewarm water for Lena's compress and wondered if dignity could be overdrafted like a bank account. 3 mornings later, storm clouds gathered without rain, muting the neighborhood into cinematic grayscale. Yvonne sifted laundry when the growl of a powerful engine settled outside. Through the blinds, she spotted a gleaming black Lincoln Town car, its paint nearly blue in the dim light. The driver exited, a tall man in a charcoal suit with crisp white gloves, and approached the porch steps carrying a narrow envelope held between thumb and forefinger as though it contained something fragile as breath. "Mrs. Harper?" His baritone was low, respectful. "Yes." She pulled her cardigan tighter, half expecting the serving tray of consequences to keep arriving. Instead, the man offered the envelope with a small bow. No clipboard, no signature required. Inside, thick cream stationery, embossed at the top with the discreet emblem of MJJ Productions. 2 sentences in looping ink. "I'm sorry. You did not deserve this." MJ, nothing more. No check, no invitation, no disclaimers about publicity. The handwriting slanted slightly left, a curious tilt that felt like someone leaning in to confide. Wind rattled dry sycamore leaves along the sidewalk. Yvonne's thumb brushed the initials again, as if touch might decode subtext. She felt no triumphant vindication, only a tremor of gratitude indistinguishable from sorrow. It was the first gesture since the firing that acknowledged her humanity without price tag. "Mama?" Lena's voice floated from the hallway. The child shuffled closer, eyes still glassy with the tail end of fever. "Who sent you mail?" "Someone saying sorry." Yvonne swallowed. A good kind of sorry. "Does it help?" Yvonne considered. Apologies could not pay electric bills or buy amoxicillin. Yet, apology anchored a world tilting in its orbit. "Yes," she replied honestly. "A little." Lena lifted onto tiptoe to study the paper, then looked up, waiting for the expression adults seldom recognize they wear. Yvonne felt her own mouth curve, small at first, then enough to kindle a dimple she had forgotten existed. The daughter's shoulders unclenched, a visible exhale of relief. Children calibrated safety by their parents' smiles. They stood together, mother and child, in the hush between respirations of a city that had not noticed any of this drama. Outside, the chauffeur re-entered the town car and pulled away with measured dignity, tires whispering over damp asphalt. The envelope, warm now from Yvonne's grasp, lay against her chest like a heartbeat not quite her own. No cameras flashed, no reporters jostled. The moment polished itself quietly, bright as a coin no one would see. And for the first time since stepping through the hotel's revolving door, Yvonne believed she could outlast the noise, not by raising her voice, but by keeping it steady. Somewhere in California, a man who once laughed over a glass of water might be hoping the same. The quiet hiss of the radiator had become Yvonne's metronome, marking another dawn spent tucking stray threads back into a life rapidly unraveling. 3 mornings had passed since the Lincolns' arrival, and Lena's fever had ebbed, but the phone, rotary, beige, steadfast, had begun to ring as though fitted with a siren. It started before breakfast, 1 shrill pulse, then 6 in a row, then silence that felt accusatory. The first caller, breathless, mispronounced Yvonne's surname and offered $200 for "your side of what really went down with Mr. Jackson." She replaced the receiver without answering, palms stinging from the force of restraint. Within an hour, 5 more calls stacked atop each other like mismatched luggage. Celebrity Insider, Southern Star, something called The Whisper, with a Los Angeles area code. Each voice advertised urgency, entitlement, and a practiced sympathy designed to disarm. By noon, she unplugged the cord from the wall, an act that felt both illicit and necessary, like locking a door during a hurricane. Yet media storms respected no knock. Late edition presses rolled, and the Atlanta Chronicle devoted 2 columns on page 3 to a headline that sounded less like news and more like an accusation wrapped in a question mark. Waitress fired for speaking to icon, hospitality ethics or corporate overreach. The article cited anonymous sources who claimed she'd flirted for attention, others who insisted she'd begged for autographs. She read each invented detail twice, cheeks prickling, before folding the page into a tight square she could not bring herself to tear. Shame lodged somewhere between sternum and throat, a mute stone too heavy to swallow. Ruby stopped by that evening carrying a casserole dish and the righteous energy of someone spoiling for a fight. You see what they're printing? You give me the word, baby, and I'll march into that newsroom like Gabriel with a trumpet. Yvonne managed a weary laugh. No armies, Ruby. They want a spectacle. I'm not giving it. Night fell. The neighborhood dimmed until street lamps flickered to life one by one, casting coins of light onto the pavement. In the hush, Yvonne felt the peculiar vibration of a decision. Silence could be louder than any quote on newsprint. She tucked Lena into bed, smoothing the quilt patterned with sailboats, and whispered a promise neither of them entirely understood. Noise can't break us if we don't invite it inside. The following afternoon, the doorbell chimed. 2 precise notes. Through the lace curtain she spotted another sedan, though this one carried a modest navy sheen instead of show cliff black. A man stepped out, tall, African-American, mid-40s maybe, with the sort of posture that suggested long hours in courtrooms where every gesture mattered. He wore a charcoal suit, navy tie, and an expression composed of equal parts courtesy and resolve. Yvonne opened the door only as wide as the chain allowed. Mrs. Harper, my name is Robert Gaines. I represent Mr. Michael Jackson. The name struck hard despite its absence from the previous barrage of gossip. She unhooked the chain. Please, come in. In the living room, Robert took no seat until invited, then chose the sagging love seat as though it were a leather boardroom chair. From an inside pocket, he produced a plain envelope and a small folder. First, Mr. Jackson sends his personal apologies for the distress this incident has caused. It was never his wish for your employment to suffer. His tone suggested he'd rehearsed, yet his eyes held genuine apology. He slid a cashier's check across the coffee table, the amount obscured by the envelope's fold. This is an ex gratia payment equal to 1 year of your lost wages, plus projected tips. No conditions attached. Money, the practical solution to a wound that wasn't practical. Yvonne stared at the envelope, heartbeat drumming in her ears. Suddenly, she imagined Lena at 10, 12, 15, reading a headline that her mother had sold an experience like a souvenir. I appreciate the gesture, she began slowly. But that isn't the repair I'm looking for. Robert inclined his head. May I ask what repair would feel sufficient? She searched for language precise enough not to crack. I want the record to show I did nothing wrong by treating another human kindly. I want my daughter to see that courtesy isn't a mistake. And I want the silence around service workers, our invisibility, not to be used against us. He listened, elbows on knees, fingers steepled. The hum of the refrigerator and the distant thud of children playing curbside filled the pause. Respect, not recompense, he said at last, as though translating her heartbeat. That is exactly why Michael wanted to reach you. She exhaled, some inner muscle unclenching. The press is spinning stories. If a statement comes, it should state plainly that no misconduct occurred. Robert opened the folder, revealing a drafted press release with blank spaces for her approval. We anticipated that. You will be credited as a professional who adhered to policy, and the hotel's decision will be described as premature. No sensational details, no embellishments. Yvonne touched the paper's edge. The words were formal, yet there, beneath jargon, lurked a new possibility: restoring her name without selling her voice. "I can live with this," she murmured. Robert smiled, a small, thoughtful upward turn. "Then we have alignment." He slid the untouched check back into his briefcase without commentary, honoring her refusal like a confidant rather than an accountant. Before rising to leave, he offered a card embossed with a Los Angeles number. "Should you change your mind about assistance, legal, financial, or simply moral, call day or night. Silence is powerful, Mrs. Harper, but so is community." She escorted him to the door. On the porch, he paused under wan December light. "For what it's worth," he added quietly, "people think fame shields a man. It doesn't. Michael remembers everyone who meets him as a person first. Your Grace reminded him of why he keeps trying." After he drove away, Yvonne lingered on the top step, breathing air that smelled of wet pine needles and distant chimney smoke. The phone inside remained unplugged, the tabloids still circling overhead like restless gulls, yet something had shifted. Acknowledgement, freely given, had filled the hollow where outrage might have grown. Lena pressed her face to the window, waving. Yvonne lifted her hand in return, a gesture half salute, half promise. The world might continue to clamor, but within these walls dignity spoke in a quieter tongue. Steady, unbroken, and, at last, heard. A fragile dawn over Atlanta found Yvonne at the kitchen table opening an envelope thick enough to command attention. The letterhead was embossed with a small gilded silhouette of a carousel horse, the address printed in a clean California serif. Inside, on a page no larger than a postcard, 6 sentences invited her to spend one day at Neverland Valley Ranch. No obligations, all travel arranged. Simply an opportunity to thank you in person. At the bottom, a single initial. *M.She set the card beside Lena's spelling worksheets and let silence weigh the decision. There was laundry to fold, bills accruing late fees, a winter cough circling the neighborhood. Flying cross-country for courtesy's sake sounded reckless. Then again, every recent choice that felt safe had extracted a hidden toll. She caught her reflection in the window. Tired eyes, yes, but steady, and whispered aloud, "Why not?" 2 weeks later, Yvonne stepped off a chartered jet into California. Light so clear it seemed to rinse her lungs. A discreet driver held a placard with her name, escorted her into a silver SUV, and offered iced tea without asking questions. They traveled north through oak-scattered hills, the traffic thinning until only the hum of tires and distant birdsong marked time. When the gates of Neverland swung inward, she braced for ostentation. Movie-set lawns, gold leaf on every surface, crowds of staff rehearsed to applaud. Instead, the estate breathed like a conservatory at rest. White fences curved around meadows where llamas grazed beside ponies. Beyond them, a small steam train chuffed along rails half hidden by wisteria. No paparazzi, no roar of generators, just wind threading eucalyptus leaves, a smell of damp earth after overnight sprinklers. At the main house, a figure waited on the veranda. No entourage, no sunglasses, just Michael, hands tucked in jean pockets, black loafers scuffing cedar planks. For a moment he looked almost boyish, as if time here ran gentle laps around him rather than chasing. "Welcome, Ivan," he said, voice softer than she remembered, yet infused with relief. "Thank you for making the trip," she offered a smile. "Airfare's easier to accept than a year's salary." A quick, rueful grin acknowledged the remark, and then he gestured toward a winding path. "Walk with me?" They strolled past rose gardens buzzing with honeybees, through an arbor where climbing jasmine perfumed the air like faint applause. Conversation unspooled in quiet increments. His long tours, her childhood in Macon, the way fame could shrink a life to the size of a hotel corridor. "I used to sneak to the grocery store at midnight," he admitted, brushing a hand over tall grass. "Not to shop, just to push the cart, listen to the wheels click. Normal sound." Ivan nodded. "Invisible is a blessing when you choose it." He paused beneath an oak whose branches spread like open arms. "I haven't seen eyes like yours in a long time. You didn't flinch, didn't aim a camera. You just saw." She searched for a deflection and found none. "I saw a man who looked exhausted. That's what frightened everyone else." He tipped his head back, studying leaves that flickered silver in the sun. "They worry exhaustion makes idols fall." Farther on, they reached a playground bordered by flowering oleander. Miniature castle turrets framed slides polished by countless laughs. A pair of staffers supervised a cluster of children racing go-karts along a track. Their cheers carried on the breeze, unapologetically joyous. "I keep this place for days. I need reminding why music matters," Michael said. "Laughter tunes the air." She watched a little boy brake too late, brake lights flashing before sand arrested his wheels. Two girls leapt to help him right the cart, giggling at the near miss. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "Would you consider working here?" The question arrived like birdsong, unforeseen yet perfectly positioned in the moment's hush. Not as service staff, as a caretaker, a mentor. These kids come from hospitals, shelters, sometimes harder places. They need someone who sees without judging. Yvonne felt a careful part of her heart lean forward. "I'm not trained in social work." "Empathy can't be credentialed," he replied. "And children sense truth faster than adults." She pictured Lena exploring these paths, returning home with stories scented by orange blossoms instead of cigarette smoke from the bus stop. The idea felt absurdly possible. Late afternoon, Amber pooled across the main hall as Michael guided her to a small screening room. A single monitor waited on a pedestal. "There's something you deserve to know," he said, pressing play. Grainy surveillance footage filled the screen. Atlanta, the hotel bar, timestamp bright in the corner. She watched herself slide a glass of water forward, tilt her head, share a sentence she no longer recalled verbatim. The angle switched to a service corridor where a uniformed employee removed the VHS cassette and tucked it beneath a coat. Michael froze the frame, a dishwasher she dimly recognized, face taut with calculation. "That tape surfaced at a gossip agency 48 hours later," he explained. "Someone sold it. The hotel blamed you to cover their security breach." The footage continued, showing managers conferring, their gestures sharp with alarm. Watching, Yvonne felt none of the earlier humiliation, only a cool clarity, as if shame had been an ill-fitting coat now shrugged off. Michael stopped the playback. "I want people to see you as I did," he said quietly, "not the silhouette tabloids drew. If you allow, my team will release the full video with context, no spin." She considered the image paused on screen, her face lit by bar lights, unguarded yet composed. "Show them," she said, but only if no one else pays a price. No one will. He reached for the remote, but before switching off, he added, "Whatever you decide about the job, know this place is yours to return to." Evening settled in lavender layers over Neverland, fountains reflecting the first timid stars. At the helipad, as Yvonne prepared to depart, Michael handed her a music box carved with miniature Ferris wheels. When she opened the lid, a lullaby version of human nature chimed delicate notes into the cooling air. "Our eyes saw each other that night," he said, fingertips resting on the edge of the box. "Now let the world see you, too, only as human." She closed the lid, the melody lingering like breath, and realized that under this estate's famous name lay a quieter kingdom, one where recognition meant presence rather than exposure. The helicopter blades began their slow rotation. She raised a hand in farewell, not to an icon, but to a fellow traveler seeking ordinary grace beneath an extraordinary sky. The guest cottage sat on the far side of Neverland's small lake, a clapboard house painted the creamy white of magnolia petals. Twilight glazed its windows a rose-gold hue, while distant fountains whispered in counterpoint to crickets. Yvonne thanked the attendant who carried her overnight bag, then stepped inside and stopped. The air smelled of cedar and faint vanilla. A turn-of-the-century phonograph rested in one corner, and an embroidered card on the mantel read, "Rest is music, too." She had not planned to stay. The helicopter that had ferried her from Santa Ynez still idled on the grass, rotors ticking down like an insistent reminder of schedules back east. Yet when a housekeeper named Anna offered warm chamomile and pointed out pajamas folded in a linen drawer, something in Yvonne's spine unclenched. She sent a message to the pilot, morning departure instead, then allowed the door to close on the night. For the first time in years, she did not dream of balancing trays or missing bus connections. Instead, sleep came like cool rain over wildfire, dousing anxieties before they could spark. If she dreamed at all, it was of carousel horses breathing, their wooden sides lifting and falling as they rested between rounds. Sunlight woke her, not an alarm. Through sheer curtains she saw jacaranda blossoms drifting across a veranda, purple against the terracotta tiles. On the dresser lay a neatly folded uniform, soft charcoal slacks, a sage-green polo, and a badge bearing only her first name above the estate's carousel emblem. A note, hand-printed, unmistakably Michael's, read, "When laughter starts, your shift begins." No hierarchy, no clock-in code. Breakfast smells, maple, cinnamon, frying plantains, led her to the staff commons. The room felt like a college dining hall transported to a botanical garden. Skylights, hanging ferns, bright enamel mugs. She took an empty seat beside a woman with silver streaks in her hair and burn scars along one arm. "I'm Camille," the woman said, offering a firm grip. "Site medic, car crash, 89, she added, catching Yvonne's glance at the scars. "Neverland reminds me my hands still work." Across the table, Miguel, the chef, flipped pancakes with showman's flair. "An ex-con," someone whispered, who'd learned soufflés in a prison culinary program. Farther down sat Raj, a quiet groundskeeper who carried himself like a man still hearing the cadence of military drills. Story after story unfolded in brief nods and half-sentences. Bankruptcy, illness, war, addiction. If the wider world labeled them damaged, here the word seemed to dissolve under sunlight, replaced by something simpler. Present. Mid-morning, she reported to the storybook pavilion, a circular room rimmed with stained glass panels depicting Aesop's animals. 10 children sprawled on beanbags, while Yvonne opened the day with the Velveteen Rabbit. They interrupted often, asking why the Skin Horse was old, whether rabbits could catch colds, how toys felt about thunderstorms, and each question slowed the tale into shared exploration. After the reading, they built papier-mâché planets for an upcoming space parade. Kevin, 9, explained orbital mechanics with the solemnity of a NASA engineer. Marisol, 6, painted Saturn's rings fuchsia because space is boring if it's all dark. Yvonne found herself laughing, a clear, surprised sound she barely recognized as hers. The spell fractured when a crisp heel click sounded behind her. Ms. Harper, correct? The speaker was Linda Stewart, ice blonde bob, ivory blazer, laminated ID from the PR office. Her smile held the elegant tension of a bowstring. Yes, can I help you? Yvonne wiped paste from her palms. Just orienting new personnel. Linda's gaze skimmed the badge, the uniform, then Yvonne's face. A word? She motioned toward the corridor lined with circus posters. In the hush outside, Linda folded her arms. I hope you grasp how delicate Mr. Jackson's reputation is. Some people angle for proximity just to write a tell-all later. Yvonne met the accusation without flinch. I angle for steady ground, Miss Stewart. That's all. Linda's lashes flickered, surprise quickly concealed. Neverland protects many vulnerable souls, including Michael. Step carefully. Then she turned, heels ringing a metronome of mistrust down the hall. The exchange stung, but only briefly. Returning to the children, Yvonne caught Kevin sneaking glitter onto his Mars so astronauts could find it faster. Realignment was that easy here. One honest laugh, and venom lost its bite. Night draped the ranch in velvet. A distant calliope wound down, while pathway lanterns painted gold hoops on the gravel. Yvonne stayed behind after lights out to inventory storybooks. As she locked the art supply cabinet, she heard muffled sobs leaking from the shadowed marquee of the indoor carousel. Inside, the ride stood motionless, jeweled mirrors reflecting only lantern glow. On the footboard of a swan-shaped chariot sat Emily, small, freckled, clutching a plush koala to her chest. Tears left dark tracks down her cheeks. I shouldn't be here after curfew, Emily whispered, guilt lacing every syllable. It's all right, Yvonne said, settling beside her. What's hurting? I go home tomorrow. The girl's shoulders shook. Mom says things are better now, but home still feels loud. Michael. When he listens, I'm not noise. Yvonne's throat tightened. She remembered decades-old echoes of slamming doors in her own childhood apartment, conversations conducted in shouts. Being heard is a kind of medicine, she agreed. Do you want to ride once more before sleep? Emily nodded. Yvonne located the switch. The carousel lights bloomed lavender and gold, calliope music serenaded the hush, and the platform began its slow orbit. They rode together, Yvonne in the Swan, Emily astride a moon-white unicorn. As the mirrors turned, Yvonne saw their reflections multiply, two figures inside concentric circles of light, grief melting into motion. When the music stopped, Emily's smile lingered like sunrise. Will you be here next time I visit? She asked. If they'll have me, Yvonne answered, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Later, back at the cottage, she stood on the porch under stars unmarred by city glare. Somewhere beyond the hills, tabloids still hunted headlines, and Linda's suspicion prowled the corridors. Yet within the ranch, a different economy ruled. Transaction weighed not in dollars or coverage, but in attentiveness, the currency of being truly seen. Yvonne inhaled the night air, scented with hay and orange blossom, and felt the rare stillness of a woman whose worth was not in question. Tomorrow she would rise in sage-green cotton, pockets full of glitter and glue sticks, to teach children how stories orbit hearts. And if outsiders chose to peer through the gates with strangers' eyes, let them. Inside, wholeness was being stitched from the threads the world had once called broken. The first omen arrived as a stack of newspapers on the Storybook Pavilion's breakfast counter, their headlines loud enough to drown the whistle of Camille's kettle. Michael's new maid? Mysterious woman from New Orleans living at Neverland. Below the type, a grainy aerial photo showed Yvonne standing beside the zoo railings, one hand steadying Emily's sun hat, while llamas grazed in soft focus. The image, shot, judging by the perspective, from a news helicopter, cropped out the art supplies clutched in Yvonne's other hand and the circle of children around her. From a distance it resembled a candid of a housekeeper shepherding privileged offspring, a picture pre-captioned for ridicule. Miguel cursed softly in Spanish. Raj switched off the radio mid-song, as if sound itself could spread contagion. Yvonne felt every pair of eyes snag on her like thorns. No one blamed her, but sympathy carried its own weight. Heavy, metallic. Impossible to set down. She read the accompanying copy. Anonymous family acquaintances insisted she had talked of nothing but fame since high school talent shows. A neighbor from her mother's street in New Orleans declared on record that Yvonne's been angling for a big break since before her baby was born. The article ended with a rhetorical dagger. Could Jackson's generosity be clouding his judgment yet again? Yvonne's throat went paper dry. She pictured her mother's narrow porch, paint peeling, now cornered by vans with satellite dishes sprouting like invasive vines. Neither she nor her mother possessed unlisted numbers. The phone would ring until the cord frayed. Robert Gaines rang her office extension before noon. "Your mother is safe," he assured her quietly. "We've provided a security detail and temporary lodging if she chooses. She's rattled, but resilient." Rattled did not cover the brittle tremor Yvonne heard in her mother's greeting when the call was patched through. "Baby, they wanted me to say you always dreamed of Hollywood. I told them you always dreamed of peace of mind." Peace felt theoretical now, an algebraic variable in someone else's equation. By evening, the ranch buzzed like an overturned hive. Linda Stewart moved through corridors, trailing the scent of expensive citrus and crisis management. In the administration suite, she cornered Michael between framed platinum records. "Optics, Michael," she pressed, tapping a manicure against the tabloid. "Compassion or not, this woman's presence converts every dormant rumor into rocket fuel. We need immediate distance, public statement, redeployment of her duties, something." Yvonne, outside the half-closed door delivering supply manifests, heard her own name sifted through Linda's suspicion like a gemstone tested for flaws. Michael's reply came soft, unhurried. "I'll speak with Robert." "That's not an answer." Linda's heels clicked once, twice. "It's the only one for now." He sounded tired, not uncertain. "I believe eyes, not cameras." The sentence, carried on the room's exhale, tracked Yvonne down the hallway and settled in her chest like a talisman. Panic visited anyway. It arrived at 2:30 a.m., when wind rattled the cottage shutters, and her mind filled the darkness with imagined shutters back home bursting open to reporters' flash guns. She tried listing practicalities, renew Lena's asthma prescription, mail rent, memorize emergency contacts, but anxiety blurred bullet points into static. She stepped outside in slippers, letting November's California chill bite sense into her skin. Far off, fairy-lit topiaries dotted the hillside, each bulb a hush spell against the world's clamor. Somewhere between the carousel and the koi pond, she realized she had never inhabited quiet this deliberate. Not the hush of poverty, which meant absence, nor the silence of hotel service, which meant invisibility. This was a curated silence, a dome built to keep tenderness intact. That knowledge steadied her pulse. The following afternoon, she taught papier-mâché without trembling hands. When Kevin asked if the moon tasted like chalk, she crafted an answer tasting of adventure. She joined Camille in cleaning skinned knees and joined Miguel in teaching fractions by slicing cornbread. Linda watched from thresholds, clipboard clasped like a shield, but Yvonne offered no vindictive glare. She had children to anchor, stories to finish. After sunset, Robert arrived bearing a sealed envelope and a gentle nod. Inside lay a brief handwritten note. They trade in lenses. We, in presence, stand where the children can see you. M. No instructions, no apologies. Just recognition. That evening, during staff supper, Raj turned up the communal television. A pundit panel debated the Neverland nanny scandal, arguing whether Michael's pattern of aiding strangers signaled philanthropy or naivety. Yvonne's photograph materialized on screen beside blurred archival footage from the Ritz bar. One commentator scoffed. She clearly knew cameras might catch that moment. Just look at the angle of her body. Another chuckled at his own joke about Cinderella and glass slippers. Yvonne's spoon hovered over stew. Across the table, Camille met her gaze and lifted 2 fingers to her own eyes. A silent, "I see you." One by one, others mimicked the gesture. No chant, no speech, a small litany of vision against spectacle. Even Linda, passing behind them, paused long enough to press a single hand to her chest before striding on, brow tight with whatever silent arithmetic she calculated. Later, Yvonne phoned her mother. Paparazzi still prowled the Magnolia district, but the security men had cordoned the yard and set out folding chairs so the old neighbors could watch the chaos like afternoon theater. Her mother's voice cracked with weary pride. "Girl, you sure stirred their pot, but the pot ain't cooking you." Yvonne laughed, a thin, astonished ribbon of sound. "I'm staying, Mama. I won't let them braid my life into their fiction." 2 nights later, a courier delivered a pre-publication copy of Southern Star magazine. The cover splashed her image beneath the headline, "Housekeeper or Heartkeeper?" The accompanying exposé was a labyrinth of half-truths and invented motives, yet Robert had slipped a note under the binding. "We have 36 hours to rebut before this circulates. Your call." She studied her own face in the photograph. Caught mid-storytelling, mouth open in laughter, she remembered feeling like oxygen. The picture did not show calculation. It showed a woman who had forgotten, briefly, to guard herself. That vulnerability, twisted into scandal, kindled something resolute inside her. "Release the full hotel video," she told Robert over the ranch's landline, voice steady. "And my statement goes with it. Kindness is never misconduct." "Understood," he replied. "And if the headlines double down?" "Then they'll write louder," she answered, almost smiling. "But they won't be writing for me." She hung up, opened the cottage window, and let cool night air flood the room. Somewhere beyond the press vans and helicopter rotors, children slept trusting her return at dawn. That promise felt louder than any headline, clean enough to live by. Yvonne first sensed the party through fragrance, gardenia, sandalwood, and something bright as newly opened citrus. Notes that drifted down the colonnade while twilight still pinked the stucco. In the lantern-lit courtyard beyond, she counted barely 20 guests, yet each possessed a gravity that could bend crowds. Elizabeth Taylor, luminous in violet silk, laughed with her whole throat near a table of peonies. Quincy Jones moved like a conductor, even while simply gesturing for more iced tea. Two Academy Award winners compared cufflinks in a corner. A world-class illusionist practiced coin flourishes for no one in particular. There were enough platinum records among them to shingle a roof. Michael greeted Yvonne by the punch bowl, his expression a quiet reassurance that she belonged, though she felt dressed in borrowed confidence. Her skirt was plain navy, her pulse, cymbal loud. He tapped the satin sleeve of her blouse and whispered, "Tonight isn't about sparkle, only ease." Then he drifted away to greet newcomers. A gull glimpsed between wave crests. She was reaching for a canapé she could scarcely pronounce when Quincy materialized at her elbow, smile warm as brass under stage lights. "Miss Harper, right?" His voice held Chicago smoke and Sunday morning church bells. "Yes, sir." Quincy's eyes narrowed fondly, as though tuning an orchestra. "You're the reason that kid's shoulders sit lower this month. First time in years I've heard him breathe before counting tempo. Takes courage to see the man, and not the marquee." Yvonne's reply tangled in gratitude and disbelief, but Quincy rescued her with a soft clap to her shoulder. "Stick by the punch. It's safer than the gossip." He winked and melted back into the current. A string trio under the pergola began shaping dusk into lilac chords. Conversation bubbled, fell, rose again, yet Yvonne sensed filament-thin threads of scrutiny crossing the terrace. Fame, she realized, did not turn walls transparent. It made mirrors of every surface. People regarded one another perpetually for angles, advantages, explanations. Even here, among supposed intimates, trust felt like contraband. The party migrated indoors when the breeze sharpened. In the music room, cedar-paneled, cluttered with African drums and lacquered harpsichords, Michael drifted toward the grand piano, as though answering a midnight call invisible to everyone else. The chatter withered. He slipped onto the bench, exhaled, and let his fingers fall. No spotlight, no prelude. 3 exploratory chords hovered, hesitated, then unfolded into a minor progression that ached like pages of an unsent letter. His left hand mapped shadowed valleys. The right summoned fragile lanterns of melody that rose and extinguished themselves before memory could store their shape. The room stilled into collective heartbeat. Elizabeth Taylor's mascara shone wet. Quincy shut his eyes, brow furrowed as if translating prayer. Yvonne, pressed against a bookcase of leather scores, felt the music glance off bone and linger in marrow. This was not performance. It was confession without syllables, regret bending around hope, solitude negotiating with wonder. When the final note decayed, wind brushed the windows, and that ordinary sound felt holy. Michael lifted his hands from the keys and let silence stand like a trusted witness. He didn't bow. He simply turned away, leaving the piano lid open as though the instrument itself should take the applause, if applause had dared to rise. Conversation resumed in ragged undertones. Yvonne went in search of air, winding through a side corridor lined with charcoal sketches. As she passed the library archway, she caught Quincy's voice, hushed yet unmistakable. "Just need to know who she is, really. Folks pop out of nowhere with stories slicker than oil. Can't blame me for checking." "Background says she's clean," answered a deeper register, someone Yvonne didn't recognize. Quincy sighed. "Backgrounds miss motive. Protect the talent first. That's the rule." His concern was professional, maybe paternal. but it pricked Ivan with a tiny burn of betrayal. Kindness from even the generous had a curfew, it seemed. After midnight, caution clocked in. She slipped out to the veranda, let darkness settle her nerves. The fountain's spray caught moonlight in crystalline arcs. Her pocket buzzed. Neverland's internal line patched to an outside call. She answered and heard her mother's breathless rush. "Baby, they're back. 2 vans, bright lights like stadiums. They shouted through the screen door that they'd pay for baby photos of you. The neighbor's boy threw a shoe at one camera, bless him, but they're swarming." Static crackled down the line, loud as insects. Ivan's gut tightened. "I'm coming, Mama." "They say you left your kid to chase fairy tales. I set him straight, but I'll be there tomorrow." She steadied her voice, promised courier speed comfort, then hung up. The fountain kept singing, indifferent. Inside, guests clustered for farewells. Ivan located Michael near the conservatory, apologizing for interrupting. "My family needs me in New Orleans," she said. "The press—" "I heard." His eyes brimmed with that strange, luminous melancholy she'd first recognized in Atlanta. From a pocket of his brocade jacket, he produced a small cassette, unlabeled, but for a single star drawn in silver ink. "I recorded tonight's sketch last week," he murmured. "Haven't shared it. Might never polish it. But you said music felt like air once. Breathe this on the flight." Ivan accepted the tape, as though it were spun from eggshell. "Why me first?" "Because you never asked," he answered simply, then squeezed her hand. Lightning brief, thunder profound. As she turned to leave, Quincy appeared, the earlier caution now softened by the piano's afterglow. He tipped an invisible hat. "Safe travels, Miss Harper. World's noisy, but melody carries farther." She thanked him, unsure whether forgiveness or understanding passed between them, only that the moment no longer scraped. Hours later, her suitcase lay open, half filled with uniforms and children's drawings. The cassette rested atop folded denim. Ivan paused, pressed play on a bedside recorder, and let Michael's unheard song spill into the room. Hesitant, hopeful, unfinished, like everything worth keeping. Outside, helicopters might already thrum over Louisiana rooftops. Headlines would sharpen their verbs. But here, under ceilings scented with gardenia and sandalwood, the music built a sanctuary one unsolicited note at a time. And Yvonne promised herself to carry that architecture wherever flashbulbs tried to blind. The train from Los Angeles screeched into Union Passenger Terminal beneath a vault of grimy skylights, but Yvonne barely registered the metallic echo. All she heard was her daughter's name pulsing at the back of her skull like a faulty drum. Lena, Lena, Lena. She hired a cab whose vinyl seats stuck to her calves in the humid dark, and asked the driver to avoid Canal Street, where news vans still prowled. The detour lengthened the ride past shuttered jazz clubs and pawn shops hung with Mardi Gras beads long since dulled by exhaust. When the cab swung onto Dauphine, her breath snagged. Garbage carpeted the front yard, crumpled soda cups, shredded supermarket circulars, brown glass that winked under the street lamp. On the rusted gate, someone had painted block letters in dripping crimson. "Sellout bitch." An empty aerosol can lay like a spent cartridge on the walk. Mrs. Ramsey, who normally watered begonias 3 doors down, retreated indoors at the very sight of Yvonne, blinds snapping shut like moth wings. Another neighbor crossed the street with her grocery bag, choosing puddles over proximity. It was an excommunication rendered in small, precise gestures. No hissed insults, just eyes that refused to focus on her, as though she were an extra on a set where they played the leads. Inside, Lena sat on the sofa, hugging a stuffed rabbit worn bald at the ears. The curtains had been drawn all day. Stale air smelled of bleach and anxiety. "The reporters keep tapping the window," she whispered, voice pinched thin. "They said if I opened the door, they'd give me candy." Yvonne knelt, pulling the child to her chest, rage blooming behind her eyes like heat stroke. She dialed the police from the kitchen phone, whose coiled cord had tangled into a noose. 2 officers arrived 45 minutes later, shoes tracking grit across the linoleum. They studied the graffiti, took perfunctory photographs, and swapped looks when Yvonne mentioned Neverland. "So you got yourself mixed up with the pop star," the older cop drawled, scribbling half-heartedly. "Publicity follows publicity." "I didn't ask for vandalism," she countered. He shrugged, as if cause and entitlement were synonyms. "Your best bet is to repaint quick. Stop dangling bait." The next morning, a registered envelope arrived from the district clerk. Notice of investigation for undeclared income exceeding $50,000, accompanied by a photocopy of a tax return she had never filed. The signature was a clumsy counterfeit, her surname misspelled 1 letter off. She imagined some opportunist rifling through tabloids, deciding that if the world insisted she'd sold her story, a forged balance sheet might float. Robert answered on the first ring from Los Angeles. "We'll contest immediately," he said, voice steady but laced with controlled fury. "Someone's manufacturing a narrative for the auditors and the evening news." "How long does truth take?" Yvonne asked. "In court? Months. In headlines?" He hesitated, the silence edgier than any words. "Sometimes, never." Letters began to arrive, mostly venom scratched in marker on torn notebook paper. Gold digger. Jackson's mistress. Hope the IRS takes your kid. She fed them to the kitchen sink's flame, watching ink slither into ash. Then, one afternoon, the postman delivered a pale blue envelope addressed in elegant violet script. Inside lay a single ivory card embossed with amethyst edging. 4 words only. "You're not alone, darling. Elizabeth." No surname, no return address, yet the calligraphy carried the same fragrance Elizabeth Taylor wore at the party. Gardenia over amber. Yvonne read the line 10 times, each repetition mending a rip she hadn't noticed until it closed. But solace was a thin shield. Journalists found new cruelty. They cornered Yvonne's pastor, bribed a former co-worker who'd once borrowed her hairbrush, quoted a cousin she hadn't spoken to in years. One tabloid ran a side-by-side of the Ritz surveillance still and the vandalized gate, asking in bold type if Karma had made a house call. Lena stopped sleeping through the night. She flinched at every brake squeal in the street, every knock that might be a fist on plywood. Yvonne caught herself revising lullabies into coded reassurances. "Hush, little baby. The flashbulbs are gone." After a week, Robert secured court dates and a restraining order, but the emotional perimeter kept shrinking. When a brick shattered the porch light at 2 a.m., spraying glass like frozen rain, Yvonne called him again. "I can fight on paper," he said, "but geography matters. Come west until this cools." "And run?" she asked, anger and exhaustion braiding themselves indistinguishably. "Relocate," he corrected gently, "not surrender." She packed only what fit in 2 suitcases. Lena's inhaler, the cassette Michael had given her, the blue card from Elizabeth, and 3 framed photos. Her late father in a shrimp boat cap, 7-year-old Lena in kindergarten yellow, and one she almost left behind. Yvonne at 19 holding a microphone during a church solo, eyes unafraid, voice mid-flight. The flight to California felt longer than the map suggested. She rehearsed explanations to the Neverland guard post, imagining barcodes of clearance, retinas scanned for sincerity. When the hired sedan eased up the vine-lined drive, late afternoon sun striping the windshield, she exhaled a week's worth of tension. The guard station loomed, white stucco, green roof, insignia of the carousel horse. An officer she didn't recognize stepped from the booth with a clipboard. Name? Yvonne Harper. Michael knows I'm coming. He flipped pages. You're not on the roster. My daughter and I. She motioned to the back seat where Lena clutched the rabbit. No authorization today, ma'am. You'll need to contact administration. The metal gate remained inert. Somewhere beyond the eucalyptus, laughter of unseen children floated, achingly familiar, as though joy existed on a radio frequency she could no longer tune. I work here, she said, hearing desperation thin her consonants. Check with Quincy Jones, with Robert Gaines. Orders are orders. The guard's face wasn't cruel, merely closed. Behind the fence sprawled lawns where she'd learned the weight of a papier-mâché planet, corridors where music forgave the raw edges of unfinished days. Now the distance between bumper and boom gate measured more than asphalt. It tallied everything she might be losing at once. Lena whispered, Mama, we can try again tomorrow. Her voice sought a certainty Yvonne could no longer counterfeit. Yvonne smoothed her daughter's hair, nodded despite the fracture yawning behind her ribs, and told the driver to turn around. As the car reversed, the guard touched 2 fingers to his cap, a gesture that might have been apology, might have been mere habit. The sun dipped, gilding the rim of the property, and for a breath she saw her reflection in the rear window, layered over those rolling fields. A woman suspended between a vandalized past and a padlocked present. She pressed Elizabeth's card between her palms like a fragile wafer of faith. You're not alone, darling. But miles of dusk suggested otherwise. Still, as headlights found the highway, she closed her eyes and pictured the carousel at rest in its pavilion, mirrors catching moonlight, waiting. Illusion or not, it remained in memory, proof that some spaces let you breathe wide. She would find a way back, she promised herself, even if every gatekeeper in California mislaid her name. First, though, she had to decide who she was when neither cameras nor caretakers were watching. Only a frightened child in the back seat and a song on a silent cassette. Night fell in ragged slices over Highway 154, each oncoming headlight a brief interrogation. The motel Yvonne chose sat half-hidden behind a shuttered fruit stand, its neon vacancy sign sputtering the word like a warning more than an invitation. She paid for 1 room, cash, at the clerk's wary suggestion, then guided Lena past a vending machine that thrummed louder than the crickets outside. The room smelled of disinfectant and loneliness. Wallpaper peeled in scallops just above the headboard. A lone fly traced frantic figure 8s beneath a buzzing fluorescent tube. Someone had kicked the full-length mirror, leaving a spiderweb of cracks radiating from the center like a frozen firework. Yvonne covered the worst of it with a towel, then wedged a chair beneath the doorknob, more for symbolism than security. She tried Robert first. His office voicemail offered confident promises about protecting client dignity, then beeped into emptiness. She redialed. Same vacuum. At length, she rang the Neverland administrative switchboard. A clipped voice informed her that her clearance badge had been deactivated. No further details were available. When Yvonne asked for Michael's personal extension, the line went mute, then disconnected. Lena curled on the bed, eyes wide. Outside, passing trucks rattled the window panes. We'll read, Yvonne suggested, opening. The Velveteen Rabbit, But the story's gentle cadence only sharpened the contrast with their setting, and Lena soon drifted into shallow, twitching sleep. Yvonne turned on the television for white noise, only to meet her own pixelated image across 3 channels. "Michael's secret love affair with fired waitress?" screamed one crawler. Another morning show panel debated whether she was Black Cinderella or just another climber, as if fairy tale archetypes formed the whole taxonomy of black womanhood. Interview clips spliced her surveillance silhouette with Neverland drone footage. Pundits deciphered every tilt of her head, every centimeter Michael had leaned forward at the piano party. She muted the set, but the captions clawed at her nerves. Unnamed sources say the singer's inner circle fears Harper's influence. Possible hush-money tax improprieties under investigation. New Orleans neighbors describe a woman obsessed with fame. Phone in hand, she considered the coast-to-coast distance to anyone who might answer. Ruby back home? Time zones made no ally, and besides, Ruby would barrel in with advice Yvonne lacked the stamina to follow. Instead, she opened the bedside drawer, half expecting a Gideon Bible, and found only a crumpled takeout menu and 3 forgotten playing cards. 2 jokers and a 10 of hearts. The coincidence felt mocking. Sometime after 3 a.m., she dozed in the armchair, jolted awake by a nightmare of camera flashes exploding like landmines. The chair beneath the doorknob had shifted. Had she moved it, or had someone tried the handle? The digital clock frowned crimson, 3:47. She pressed a palm to the door. Cold, undisturbed. Paranoia tasted metallic on her tongue. Morning sunlight sliced through thin curtains with surgical precision, illuminating a newscaster mid-sentence. Yvonne, still in yesterday's clothes, reached for the remote, but the headline routed her, "Exclusive. Private letter from Jackson to mystery woman revealed." There, on screen, sat the page Michael had once folded into an envelope. "I haven't seen eyes like yours in a long time. You didn't flinch. You just saw me." The anchor read the lines aloud, savoring them as if tasting scandal. Comments threaded beneath the broadcast's live feed. Gold digger script in progress. She's carving a piece of the estate before the family can. Another liar wanting her 15 minutes. The vitriol scrolled faster than the ticker could catalog. Yvonne stared until the words blurred into gray static. Something numbed inside her. Not surrender, but the shock a body feels when cold pond water closes over the head. Lena woke crying from a dream she could not name. Yvonne hushed her, brewed motel coffee that tasted of rust, and wondered how long a human voice could hold firm before splintering. Near noon, after another round of unanswered calls, she braved the parking lot for fresh air. The coastal wind smelled of eucalyptus and distant ocean, indifferent to her crisis. Returning, she almost tripped over an envelope slid beneath the door. No stamp, no address. Inside, on thick cream paper, a single sentence in an angular, unfamiliar hand. "To see me, first look at yourself." No signature, no context. Threat or solace, she could not decide. The handwriting bore none of Michael's looping grace, none of Robert's courtly precision. She studied the pen pressure, the clipped serif tails, searching for latent menace, secret empathy, or both. Lena tugged her sleeve. "What does it mean?" "That the mirror's broken," Yvonne murmured before she caught herself. "It means we figure out who we are when no one's watching." Except the world was watching, and the mirror was national television. The cracked motel glass reflected her in jigsaw fragments, chin, cheek, brow, none of them aligning quite right. She taped the anonymous sentence above the television, then unplugged the set. Outside, semi-trailers thundered by, hauling goods to places where her name meant nothing. Inside, 2 suitcases lay open like unanswered questions. She sat between them, legs crossed, and closed her eyes against the roar of imagined headlines. In the hush that followed, she forced herself to breathe to a count of 4 as Michael's unfinished melody replayed in memory. Hesitant notes, searching for cadence. The world beyond these walls mispronounced her story, rewrote motives, auctioned private sentences. But here, in this threadbare room scented with cheap detergent and child fear, she could still claim the space between heartbeats. She would phone Robert again and again until persistence became its own percussion. She would draft a statement louder than gossip, quieter than grace, and if silence answered, she would answer herself, because the first stranger she needed to confront was the woman blinking back from cracked glass. Trembling, yes, but upright. The question wasn't whether the gate would reopen. It was whether she could carry Neverland's hush inside her long enough to find whatever door came next. Beyond the unplugged TV, beyond the paper walls, the world kept yelling. Yvonne listened to the quieter sound beneath. Her daughter's steady breathing, the click of cooling metal in the coffee pot, the rustle of an unsigned letter curling in the breeze from the air conditioner. Noise, or no noise, these were the sounds she could claim as proof she still existed, whole. In that moment, isolation became a room of her own making, and therefore one she could, eventually, choose to leave. The Greyhound from Santa Barbara crawled into downtown Los Angeles beneath a noon sky the color of dirty glass. Diesel haze clung to the sidewalks. Blinking marquees promised miracles for $39 a night. And Yvonne Harper stepped onto the curb with a suitcase in one hand and a pulse thumping like a bass drum in the other. Fight, she had told herself somewhere along the Pacific Coast Highway. Fight, or be written out of your own story. Robert Gaines's office occupied the 8th floor of a terracotta tower on Wilshire, a modest suite distinguished only by brass letters on smoked glass. Gaines and Associates, Entertainment Law. But the lobby lights were off, the potted ficus drooping against a locked door. A cleaning woman pushing a cart paused when Yvonne rattled the handle. "You looking for Mr. Gaines? He's gone." She lowered her voice. "Word is, the label cut him loose. Too friendly with certain clients." A conspiratorial shrug. Down the hallway, someone had already slid a vacancy flyer into the door jamb. Opportunity prowled faster than grief in this town. Panic grazed Yvonne's ribs, but action drove her feet. She flagged a cab to Santa Monica Boulevard, destination Record One Studios, one of the rooms where Thriller had rewired the planet. If Michael was anywhere, if anyone loyal still orbited him, answers might collect there like iron filings around a magnet. Record One's reception smelled of ozone and fresh lacquer. Platinum plaques lined the foyer like polished shields. The desk attendant, a young man wearing studio headphones as a statement necklace, looked Yvonne up and down, assessing the thrift store blazer, the exhaustion in her eyes. "I need to speak with someone from Mr. Jackson's team," she announced, voice calm from practice, not confidence. "It's urgent." He clicked his tongue against an orthodontic retainer. "Studio's on blackout. No walk-ins, no messages." "I worked at Neverland. He'll know my name." A second attendant appeared, bulkier, with the scent of vanilla protein shake. "Ma'am, we'll have to ask you to leave." He angled his body just enough to signal inevitability. Yvonne opened her mouth, closed it, then noticed movement beyond the smoked glass doors leading to Studio A. A silhouette, glove on one hand, the unmistakable posture of someone who'd spent decades keeping his chin tucked and shoulders narrow to dodge the public's hunger. "Michael?" She stepped forward. The larger attendant blocked her, and when she craned sideways, two security guards were already hustling the figure down an inner corridor. She caught only the heel of a black loafer before the door sealed. "Please," she whispered, but plea collided with plywood. She was steered, gently, expertly, back into Los Angeles glare. She stood outside long enough for palm tree shadows to slip across the pavement. Then, through the tinted glass, she spotted a cardboard box on the lobby sofa, small, tied with twine like an afterthought. The receptionist was on the phone, chair pivoted away. An automatic door hissed as a courier exited. Yvonne slipped inside on the courier's wake. 2 strides to the sofa, 1 deft sweep, and the box was under her arm. She walked out before the receptionist swiveled. In an alley behind a shuttered video rental store, she loosened the knot. Inside lay a handmade rag doll in a blue gingham dress, the very one she'd sewn for Emily back at Neverland, right down to the mismatched button eyes. Nestled against its cotton torso was a microcassette, no larger than a pack of gum, unlabeled. No note. No explanation. A message disguised as nostalgia. That night she checked into a budget hotel off Sunset, a marginal upgrade from the roadside inn, its hallway carpets patterned with abstract stains that looked suspiciously like continents. Lena curled beneath the quilt, watching Wheel of Fortune on mute, while Yvonne scoured pawnshops by phone for a microcassette recorder. She found one, battered, reliable, in a second-hand electronics stall, and hurried back through neon drizzle, clamping the device like stolen treasure. She waited until Lena's breathing settled into the slow tide of sleep, then shut herself in the bathroom, the only place thin walls felt thicker. Fluorescent light flattened every shadow. She slipped the tape into the recorder, pressed play. Static, a shuffle, then Michael's voice, unvarnished, bare, a man speaking to the only listener who never lies. Magnetized tape. Midnight again. They say a rumor travels 6 times around the world before truth puts on its boots. My boots are missing. I wish. Silence, followed by a sigh, long enough to sketch loneliness. I wish my name didn't echo back at me like a stranger. People keep handing me mirrors, but none of them show skin. Only spotlight. Every hello feels like an invoice. Yvonne pressed a knuckle to her lips. The room's hum quieted, as if plumbing itself paused to listen. I don't know who sold the letter. Someone close enough to find the drawer, far enough not to care what it meant. I hear lawyers. We can plug leaks, plug holes, plug ears. But trust? A low laugh, brittle. Trust is helium. You let go once, it's already in the clouds. Papers rustled. Maybe he paced while recording, footsteps soft on studio carpet. They tell me to erase new songs, lock them, encrypt them. But music grows lonely in vaults. Then she walked in, Atlanta girl with tired eyes, and for 3 minutes the vault door opened. She didn't flinch. Saw a man, not a myth. First time in forever I heard my own laugh without echo. Another pause, shorter, steadier. Yvonne, if you ever hear this, remember the swan chariot after lights out. Things we whispered to keep a child from crying. Maybe that's all the world needs. 2 people brave enough to stay when cameras leave. If you can still see the heart, maybe I can learn to see mine again. Click. The tape ended. Yvonne exhaled, realizing she had been balanced on the edge of the bathtub, knuckles white around the recorder. Tears threatened, but not the scorching kind. These were cool, astonished, born of witnessing someone else's private fracture, align with her own. In the cracked mirror above the sink she caught her reflection. Cheeks hollowed by sleeplessness, resolve flickering but alive. The anonymous note, the doll, the cassette. Breadcrumbs through a forest of manufactured noise. Someone, Michael himself, or an ally still hidden, believed she could follow the trail. Beyond the door, Lena murmured in dreams. Yvonne tucked the recorder into her duffel, gently repositioned the gingham doll on the nightstand, and lay beside her daughter, listening to distant traffic surge like an angry ocean. Fight. Yes, but not only for herself. She reached for Lena's hand, and in the hush heard Michael's final words echo between the mattress springs and the city's restless neon. Maybe I can learn to see mine again. Morning would bring strategy, tracking Robert, confronting the studio, drafting truth loud enough to pierce static. But tonight, she allowed the lullaby of tape hiss to recalibrate her courage. She was not simply a headline's silhouette or a gatehouse reject. She was the keeper of a story both of them were still composing, one stolen micro-cassette at a time. The rental bungalow on Del Mar Boulevard did not know her history, and that anonymity felt like mercy. Its stucco was sun-bleached, its porch rails sagged where succulents spilled from chipped terracotta pots, and the lemon tree in back dropped fruit with the casual generosity of Pacific air. In Pasadena, no one lingered on her face at the grocery store. The cashier asked only if she preferred paper or plastic. A month had passed since the motel, since cameras had trailed her shadow. Headlines had found brighter meat to chew. An athlete's scandal, a senator's gaffe. So Yvonne Harper slipped at last into the thin light of ordinary time. She rose before dawn, packed Lena's lunch, peanut butter and jelly with the crust cut trumpet-shaped because the child claimed triangles tasted more adventurous, and walked her to a Spanish tile elementary bordered by jacaranda. Then Yvonne rode the Metro Gold Line to a craftsman house in Bungalow Heaven, where she minded 2 toddlers for a pair of aerospace engineers. The work was gentle, building block towers, reciting Goodnight Moon, timing naps to the hush of ceiling fans. Her employers praised her calm. They never once uttered the surname Jackson. By 5:30, she was back on Del Mar, stirring red beans, helping Lena diagram sentences, reading A Wrinkle in Time aloud until eyelids drooped. The silence that remained after bedtime had a different texture from Neverland's curated hush. It was flat, a page left blank by accident, waiting for words. Some evenings she filled it with laundry or budget math. Others she pressed play on borrowed VHS tapes labeled in faded Sharpie. Motown 25, Wembley 88, Bucharest 92. She watched Michael move with impossible liquidity, watched crowds answer with tidal fervor, and for the first time she wept, not because her life had veered, but because his had always been held hostage by that thunder. The distance between the man at the bar in Atlanta and the deity on the Jumbotron felt savage. She wondered if he, too, sat alone some nights marinating beans, wishing applause could be folded small enough to pocket. Pasadena autumn sharpened daylight into bronze. One Saturday, a package appeared on the porch. No stamps, no courier label, just her name in neat block letters. Inside, cushioned by shredded sheet music, rested a figurine the size of Yvonne's palm. A woman molded from pale walnut, eyes closed in tired serenity, cradling a child whose face tipped upward trustingly. The carving was imperfect, an ear slightly larger, a thumb unfinished, but the grain shimmered where palm oil had polished it. Tucked beneath was a single fold sheet of ivory stock. "You didn't have to save me, but you did. Forgive me, I couldn't shield you." MD*, 3 sentences, 11 words, signature reduced to initials that still carried stadium weight. She read them once, twice, then pressed the page to her chest to feel the echo of the hand that wrote it. He had been watching then. He had understood the price she'd paid, even while his lawyers cautioned silence. The realization was relief laced with sorrow. Relief that their brief alignment had mattered. Sorrow that even in his kingdom he could not always command safety. That night, she set the statuette on the narrow mantel beside Lena's spelling trophies. She stood back, studying the way sunset lit its curves. The woman's carved posture was neither triumphant nor defeated. It was simply bearing. One arm steady around the child, the other free, as though ready to reach again. Lena padded out in pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Who's the lady?" "A reminder," Yvonne answered. "Of what?" "That some stories are bigger than the noise around them." She guided Lena back to bed, tucked the quilt, and lingered, watching her daughter's breaths even out. The porch light cast soft bands on the floorboards. Outside, distant freeway hissed like the ocean. Later, she brewed chamomile and opened a fresh notebook, its pages smelling of starch and new beginnings. She wrote the date, then a sentence. "Tonight I was told my life mattered by someone the world calls larger than life." She paused, listening to rain gutters clink. Then she kept writing, about Atlanta marble floors, about a glass of water that tasted of exhaustion, about paper tabloids that shredded reputations because truth sold slower. Words spilled without apology, not memoir for profit, but testimony for resilience, because perhaps someday another invisible worker would need evidence that kindness could survive public crucifixion. When the tea cooled and lines filled, she closed the cover, slid the book beneath the statuette, and exhaled. Fame had slipped from her like an ill-fitting borrowed coat. What remained was warmer. The humble weight of continuity, morning routines, the knowledge that somewhere a man whose footsteps reshaped decades still carved gestures of gratitude in walnut. Pasadena's quiet was no longer empty. It was spacious. And in that space, Yvonne felt the first outline of what life after the first front pages might hold. A life where she was neither prop nor pariah, but author. Tomorrow would bring lunches to pack, noses to wipe, bills to balance. It would also bring another blank sheet in the notebook, another chance to keep the real music playing beneath the static. For now, she turned off the lamp, letting the room fall into soft outline. The statuette caught moonlight, casting a double shadow, mother and child, one story carrying another. And Yvonne, drifting toward sleep, understood that shadow, too, belonged to her, and always had. 3 months folded quietly over Pasadena like pages in a library nobody visited after dark. Spring oranges ripened on the backyard tree. Lena learned to skip rope to the rhythm of cicadas, and Yvonne, though still measuring rent against groceries with algebraic precision, felt her breath reconciling with her ribs again. On a Tuesday, painted clean by rain, she answered the kitchen phone, pencil poised above a grocery list. "Ms. Harper, Nigel Carr, with the BBC documentary unit." The accent balanced charm on a penknife edge. "We're assembling a definitive portrait of Mr. Jackson. Unfiltered. We believe you can, at last, supply the missing witness." He let the sentence rest, like a coin winking on velvet. "We would, of course, compensate you for exclusive rights. 100,000 US dollars, wired on signature." He translated the sum into pounds, then into what it might buy. Private schooling for Lena, a down payment. Perhaps a holiday, somewhere where your name isn't headline material. Yvonne pinched the bridge of her nose. Through the window she saw the mailman stoop, leaving bills that would gulp half her nanny wages. Temptation fluttered, a paper moth toward porch light. "I won't sell what was never mine," she said, voice steady. Nigel persisted. Ethical responsibility, public record, catharsis. She thanked him, hung up, and felt the house exhale around her, relieved and apprehensive at once. The phone rang again before the dial tone fully died. "Ms. Harper?" A woman's timbre, low, unhurried, seasoned by cigarettes or sorrow. No introduction. "You've declined many things, but there are some you shouldn't relinquish." "Who is this?" "Someone who believes stories belong to the people who live them." A brief pause, the crackle of turning pages. "Tomorrow evening, the Arroyo Book Room, back patio. Small circle of women, no cameras, no fees. Come if you wish to speak your own name aloud." The line clicked dead, leaving the kitchen wall clock suddenly too loud. The Arroyo Book Room was one of those Pasadena relics where books leaned like old friends against one another, spine to spine. Its back patio smelled of wet stone and jasmine. 12 metal chairs formed a loose crescent around a kerosene lamp. The audience, librarians off shift, a historian with silver penciled through her locks, 2 students clinging to notebooks. No one held a recorder. They introduced themselves only by first names and favorite chapter headings. When Yvonne's turn arrived, she rose, palms damp. "I was taught that waitstaff should glide, tray steady, personal life invisible. Then one evening I served water to a man everyone else called a miracle, until he became too human for their liking." She traced the glass rim of her teacup as she spoke. About the hotel corridor that smelled of lemon polish, about losing work for kindness, about tabloid storms that confused her daughter's playground with a battlefield. She did not mention Michael more than necessary, and never by surname, describing him instead as a tired voice looking for an offstage whisper. The women listened the way archivists listen to a cracked phonograph, leaning in, guarding the fragile groove. Yvonne admitted the nights in cheap motels, the moment she taped an unsigned sentence above a silenced television. The day anonymity returned and left an echo inside her like an empty church bell. "Fame," she concluded, "burns hottest in the shadows it throws on everyone nearby." A hush followed, deeper than applause. One woman offered a flask of mint tea. Another pressed a card for a trauma-writing workshop. Yvonne accepted both, throat thick. She realized this was the first room since Neverland where presence did not feel like trespass. Before they dispersed, she recalled a line she had carried in pocket silence for months. "Someone I once met said, 'Everybody claims to hunt the truth, but truth is quiet. It waits in the corners that shouting never reaches.' I believe that. Tonight your listening feels louder than any microphone." No recording captured the murmur of agreement, the scrape of chairs, the way the patio lamp flickered like a heartbeat, reluctant to go to sleep. Yet as Yvonne walked home under sycamores, shedding scented bark, she sensed something recalibrated. She could speak without selling, give without bleeding. The documentary producers might keep dialing. Conspiracy theorists might keep crafting templates for betrayal. Let them. She had finally stood upright inside her own story and found the floorboards held. Back in the bungalow, she checked on Lena, then set her notebook open beneath the walnut statuette. Instead of chronicling pain, she wrote a single declarative sentence. Truth survived another night without headlines. The words looked small against the wide page, but they glowed. Ink finding oxygen, a quiet torch neither clamor nor currency could claim. A coastal fog hung over Santa Barbara like unspooled gauze the morning Yvonne Harper stepped off the Pacific surfliner, clutching an envelope stamped with the globe and children emblem of Heal the World. Inside, no greeting, only longitude and latitude, a date, and the handwritten phrase. Project number 7.5. The coordinates led her inland to an old citrus warehouse repurposed as a studio. A single security light hummed above the door. Otherwise, the building kept its own counsel. She entered to the smell of dusted canvas and warm circuitry. 6 children, 2 boys in wheelchairs, twin sisters whispering in Spanish, a lanky teen whose bass laugh almost concealed a stutter, painted storyboards across a horseshoe of tables. At the far end stood a lawyer she recognized from Neverland's quieter corners, and a producer in jeans frayed at the knees. No cameras, no entourage, only that familiar hush which always seemed to precede something profound. "Thank you for trusting coordinates," the producer said, offering a calloused handshake. "I'm Devon. Michael and I began a documentary anthology. Working title, Project number 7.57 chapters. 7 ordinary lives that intersect his music without eclipsing their own light." He guided her past microphones, sleeping in their cradles, toward a small screening alcove. Chapter 4 was yours before either of us realized it. The room dimmed. A projector coughed to life. Grainy footage bloomed onto the hanging sheet. Slow-motion images of white hands and black hands passing a single vinyl record from child to child. An intercut of empty stadium seats dissolving into battered school desks. Finally, a pencil sketch that animated itself frame by frame. A woman in a hotel uniform kneeling to meet her daughter's gaze, then straightening as a weary performer in a hoodie approaches. The child lifts a glass of water. No dialogue, only a piano riff, hesitant, unresolved, unmistakably Michael's. As the sketch faded, a caption appeared in rough pencil. Yvonne. Devon paused the reel. He was building metaphors out of small mercies, he said softly. Wanted kids to understand that heroes aren't gods. They're the ones who notice thirst before applause. The lawyer unrolled a parchment of rights releases, but didn't push them forward. "This isn't employment," he clarified. "It's guardianship. Michael asked that you finish this chapter however feels true. If you need equipment, mentors, time, take it. Funding's secured through the foundation. The only requirement is that the final cut speaks in your voice, not his." Yvonne stared at the blank portion of the storyboard left intentionally unpainted, a silhouette awaiting color. Months ago she would have shrunk from the absence, afraid to fill it wrong. Now she felt the space tug like an open door on a warm night. "What about the other chapters?" she asked. 6 producers, 6 different lenses," Devon answered. "But he saw yours as the hinge, the point where the story admits that fame's harsh light can't kill every seed of ordinary grace." One of the twins approached, holding a palette daubed with acrylic suns. "Do you like orange for hope?" she asked shyly. "For sunrise," Yvonne corrected with a smile, choosing a brush. Her hand trembled, but not from fear, rather from the static before a microphone goes live. They spent the afternoon swapping fragments. Yvonne spoke about the Ritz's silent etiquette, about the motel's cracked mirror, about how a carved walnut mother kept balancing her mantle. The children offered their own vignettes of mispronounced names, foster homes, and lunchtime cruelties. Devon looped Michael's unfinished piano track, letting it breathe like an extra voice in the room. And storyboards bloomed with mixed media. Crayon cityscapes layered over film stills, Polaroids stitched into watercolor clouds. At dusk, when everyone drifted toward pizza boxes, Yvonne lingered before the screen. The sketched Yvonne lifted the glass again and again in seamless loop. never quite reaching the singer's hand because the frames were incomplete. She laid her palm on the cool surface, feeling pulse meet phosphor. "I'm not a filmmaker," she said quietly. Devon shrugged. Neither was he, until he refused to let other people tell his story. Outside, marine air carried brine and the distant bark of seals. Yvonne pulled her coat tighter and realized the feeling blooming in her ribs was not anxiety, but authorship. Project number 7 was less invitation than inheritance, proof that witness could graduate into narration. Tachitik. That night, back in the Pasadena bungalow, Lena spilled homework sheets across the kitchen table. Yvonne told her about the studio, the kids, the pencil-drawn mother who still needed color. Lena considered, tongue poking at a loose tooth. "Paint her dress purple," she announced. "Purple's the color you pick when you're not scared of people staring." Yvonne laughed, full, steady, then opened her notebook to a fresh page. She wrote a working title, Water Without Ice, Chapter 4. Underneath, she jotted the first line she knew the film must keep. "Silence is where truth sets its tempo." Michael's phrase, reborn with new measure. The story ahead would still bruise. The world had not grown gentler. But tonight, the bruise felt shaped like a doorway, and she had learned how to walk through. A brittle wind had chased the jacaranda petals from Del Mar Boulevard by the time Yvonne mounted her front steps again, arms aching from grocery bags and storyboards. All week, the mailbox had been choked with supermarket circulars. Tonight, it gaped empty, its flag drooping like a tired tongue. She balanced her keys, nudged the screen door, and halted. Something leaned against the jamb. A hardback edition of The Velveteen Rabbit, cloth-bound in faded teal. The Neverland Library stamp still ghosting the inside cover. A square had been carved into the pages as neatly as a carpenter's mortise, leaving a silent chamber inside the tale. Nestled there lay a single sheet of ivory stationery, edges deckled, words slanted in the looping hand she could recognize by heartbeat alone. "Thank you for not breaking. I could not shield you, but you protected my faith in people. You have every right to withhold forgiveness. Just please keep being." No date, no postmark. A letter without an envelope, as if even paper wanted no barrier between breath and meaning. Yvonne locked the door behind her, set Lena's lunchbox on the counter, and folded the sheet once, twice, then pressed it to her sternum until ink warmed against skin. At dawn, she slipped away while Lena still slept, driving up the 210 toward the weather-stained depot in San Bernardino, where she had waved goodbye to her father the last time he shipped out with a railroad crew. The station had since surrendered its ticket counters to pigeons and graffiti, but the iron benches remained, cold and stubborn. She chose the farthest one, inhaled the rust of rain-soaked rails, and, voice shaking, read the letter aloud to ghosts, to freight whistles, to her own pulse. "Thank you for not breaking." The words unfurled into the vaulted ceiling, filling the empty arrival board where destinations once flipped like prayers. A footstep scuffed the terrazzo. Yvonne turned to find a woman in a smart blazer holding a styrofoam cup. Her hair was salon-precise, but her eyes carried the same second-hand fatigue Yvonne saw in mirrors on bad nights. "Excuse me," the stranger began, shy yet urgent. "Are you Yvonne Harper?" Yvonne's answer caught in her throat. She nodded. "I recognized you from that long article, the one without the awful headline." The woman offered a rueful smile. "I used to think Michael Jackson was just spectacle, sequins and sales numbers, but the way you spoke about the glass of water, it felt like someone cracked a window in a very loud room." She tightened her grip on the cup. I wanted to say thanks. You changed how I measure what's real." Yvonne's first instinct was to retreat into practiced invisibility. Instead, she gestured to the bench. They sat side by side while freight cars clanged in the distance, two ordinary women sharing an extraordinariness that had suddenly become portable. "What's real," Yvonne said slowly, "is usually the quietest part." She folded the letter once more. "But quiet things travel if we carry them." The woman, her name was Denise, a paralegal commuting between cases, nodded as though receiving coordinates. They spoke a while longer about children, mortgages, the way music sneaks into workdays through humming. When they parted, Denise walked lighter, and Yvonne realized she did too. That evening, back in Pasadena, Yvonne slid Michael's letter into the hollow book and placed it on the mantel beside the walnut figurine. The hiding place felt fitting, a story inside a story, protected yet readable to anyone who cared enough to open the cover. Lena asked why her favorite bedtime book had a secret pocket now. Yvonne answered that some stories grow new chapters when they've been loved hard enough. After her daughter slept, Yvonne opened her project notebook. Under the heading, Chapter 4, Revision 2, she wrote, "The world didn't apologize, but it listened, once, on a train platform. Truth doesn't need headlines, it just needs enough carriers to walk it past the noise." She paused, hearing Los Angeles traffic hush into the distance, then added Michael's final imperative. B. The night pressed its ear to the window, as if eager for the next sentence, but she let the ink dry there, incomplete, alive, waiting. June light fell golden over the stucco walls of the East Pasadena Girls Enrichment Center, the kind of warm that made tired souls forgive another fiscal year of underfunding. Yvonne Harper, now 53, hair threaded with dignified silver, knelt beside a pair of ninth graders arguing about an algebra problem, coaxing patience out of diffidence the way she once coaxed melody from a frightened pop star. The center sat in a converted church basement, its windows barred more for stray soccer balls than security, its bulletin boards crowded with affirmation quotes and college brochures. No camera crews had crossed its threshold in the decades since Yvonne accepted the job. Donors preferred glossier initiatives. The girls preferred an adult who met eye level without pity. Here, Yvonne taught resume basics, Shakespeare monologues, first aid, whatever the day required. At 5, she locked the supply closet, drove her aging Corolla east through jacaranda shade, and parked outside the small rental she still called home. Inside, Lena, 23, honors cord resting like sunrise across a graduation gown, practiced walking the living room runway in borrowed heels. Yvonne clapped, corrected posture, laughed until the cicadas outside seemed choreographed. Their life was modest, rhythmic. Saturday yard sales, Sunday pot roasts, a shared Netflix password with the neighbor. Fame, scandal, even Project Number 7 had receded into memory's soft focus montage. On 25th June 2009, routine fractured. Yvonne carried a tray of lemonade glasses into the common room where graduates rehearsed speeches. Across the mounted television, a red banner screamed, "Breaking News." Below it scrolled a line she read 3 times before comprehension struck. Pop icon, Michael Jackson, dead at 50. The anchor's voice sounded underwater. Cardiac arrest, West Los Angeles, pronounced at 2:26 p.m. Fans gathering outside UCLA Medical Center. The words arranged themselves like funeral lilies, each petal stealing oxygen. The girls' chatter faded. Even their teenage omnipotence recognized a cultural fault line. Somebody clicked the sound off, but silence only sharpened the headline's blade. Yvonne set the tray down, lemonade sloshing over her shoes. For a moment, She was back in the Ritz lobby, back in Neverland's Carousel Pavilion, back in a motel bathroom threading microcassette tape with shaking fingers. The chronology blurred until only one image remained. A man sipping water without ice, offering a laugh he'd forgotten was his. That night, she and Lena sat through networks replaying Thriller, Billie Jean, set list snippets from Munich and Yokohama. Crowds wailed, pundits speculated, doctors speculated, everyone speculated. Yvonne switched the television off, and they ate dinner in near-ritual silence, as if noise might jinx the only real memories left. 2 days later, Yvonne rose before dawn, packed a tote with water bottles and a single sunflower, and drove north on the 101. She told no one, including Lena. Neverland's gates had become makeshift altars by the time she arrived, poster boards bleeding marker tributes, teddy bears sagging under June heat, candles guttering in the breeze from passing news vans. Strangers pressed against iron bars, singing muffled choruses of Heal the World that drifted off-key into oak groves beyond. Yvonne stood at the outskirts, sunflower cradled like pilgrimage evidence, saying nothing. Cameras orbited for tearful sound bites. She kept her eyes on the mosaic of fan letters taped to the gates, layer upon layer until metal disappeared beneath paper. When space opened, she wedged the flower between two slats, petals brushing a child's crayon drawing labeled, "Thank you for the music." For 3 hours she remained, letting the communal grief pulse around her. She thought about the unfinished documentary, the walnut statuette, the letter hidden in the velveteen rabbit, thought about how many glasses of water had been spilled, drunk or refused across his 50 years, and how few of those moments the world would ever deem headline-worthy. At dusk she turned away without goodbye. The truest farewell had happened years earlier, when he asked her simply to be. The call reached her 4 nights later. "Ms. Harper?" A man's voice, raspy with exhaustion and perhaps disbelief at his own role. "You don't know me. I was part of Mr. Jackson's archival team." Yvonne steadied the receiver. The house smelled of lemon oil furniture polish. Lena hummed in the kitchen, oblivious. He left multiple personal recordings," the caller continued. "One is addressed to the woman who saw the man. Your name wasn't written, but I think it's you, if you'll receive it." Yvonne rested against the hallway wall, knees trembling like unfledged wings. News programs still autopsied ratings and toxicology. Tabloids auctioned private diaries, real and forged. Yet somewhere beyond data dumps lay a final microcassette, possibly carrying a restless fragment of melody, or merely a sigh too fragile for headline print. "Yes," she whispered. "Please. Courier will need a signature within 48 hours. I'm sorry for your loss, for all our loss." She thanked him, hung up, and pressed her palm to the wall, feeling its cool resistance. Lena entered, concern tilting her brow. "Everything okay, Mom?" Yvonne managed a nod. Outside, Pasadena's street lamps ignited one by one like tentative stars. She knew the coming recording would not resurrect the man, nor stitch close the cultural rupture his absence left. But perhaps, in those magnetized winds of his voice, there remained one more heartbeat, one more beat between notes, reminding her that truth, quiet, stubborn, outlives the lights that try to overexpose it. She closed her eyes and listened to the hush between lamppost clicks, letting grief settle without spectacle. Somewhere in that silence, she felt the timid promise of continuity, a pulse asking nothing louder than keep being. And she intended to answer. The archive looked nothing like legend. No labyrinth of gilded vaults, No velvet ropes or white-gloved attendants. It occupied a squat stucco warehouse on the edge of Burbank's airport perimeter. Its sign so faded, the "Re-In Records" had flaked away. A single airliner roared overhead as Yvonne Harper stepped from her car, and for a moment the sound felt ceremonial, like drums at a threshold. Inside, climate units hummed over rows of beige cabinets. Fluorescent bulbs lent every object the unreal pallor of X-ray film. A clerk, young, freckles, headphones draped round his neck, checked her driver's license against a typed note, then produced an acid-free box no bigger than a lunch pail. Nothing else. No non-disclosure forms, no cameras, only a quiet expectation she already understood the weight of what waited inside. He placed the box on a listening booth desk and withdrew. Yvonne steadied her breath, unclipped the lid, and found a single Maxell tape wrapped in tissue. Shadow's Kindness, handwritten on the spine in familiar looping blue. Alongside lay a cream card, the ink a little trembled. If you're hearing this, everything that needed to happen has happened, and that is all right. You were never a shadow. You were the light that walked into mine. Don't back away. Don't fall silent. You know what I meant. EB, her fingertips tingled, as though the plastic shell carried residual electricity. She slid the cassette into the deck. Spools whirred, and static cleared like curtains parting. Okay, tape's rolling. A soft exhale, then his speaking voice, raw, unposed. Sometimes I think the stage is a lighthouse, and I'm the ship that never reaches shore. But once in Atlanta, someone handed me plain water and didn't want a souvenir. Didn't even want me to dance. She just wanted me to be less tired. If you're listening, I guess the ocean finally calmed. I hope you're still handing out water, Yvonne. The world's still thirsty. A pause, the faint squeak of piano bench. He began to sing. Just a verse, no accompaniment, a melody sketched in footsteps rather than notes. Kindness in the corner of a room too dark for eyes. You didn't chase the thunder. You soothed the storm inside. One chord on the keyboard, unresolved, hanging like a star that refused to declare dawn. Tape hiss returned, then the click of the stop button he must have pressed himself. Yvonne pressed eject, holding the cassette as if it might crumble. She knew immediately the song would never migrate to playlists, never fill arenas. Its power lay in being unfinished. A thread only 2 people could follow. She replaced it in the box and sealed the lid, a private reliquary. A week later, the center buzzed with Friday anticipation, teenage chatter, the thunk of lockers, the cinnamon of cafeteria churros drifting up the stairwell. Yvonne gathered a semicircle of 5th graders for story hour. Today's choice? The Velveteen Rabbit. The unaltered library copy. Its hollow still hiding a letter that pulsed like a hidden drum. She read of worn fur and real love until one girl, eyes wide behind discount store glasses, interrupted. Miss Yvonne, is it true you actually knew Michael Jackson? The room stilled. Even the hallway seemed to hush. Yvonne closed the book gently, letting its spine sigh. 100 answers hovered, tabloid sagas, midnight conversations, a glass of water without ice, but she offered the one that kept both of them free. No, she said, soft enough that the children leaned closer. I simply gave a tired man a drink. Puzzled frowns melted into acceptance. The lore of pop royalty mattered less than the rabbit becoming real. She reopened the book, and their heads dipped back into the page's gravity. When the bell released the building, Yvonne returned the book to her desk. Through the window she watched the girls scatter toward weekend lives, backpacks bouncing, voices bright. In the far corner, the pianino missed her. Crowley had donated years ago, waited for the tuning it never quite received. She crossed the room, lifted the fallboard, and pressed a key, F-sharp, slightly flat. Then another. The half-true notes shimmered in late afternoon dust like a promise that perfection wasn't the only way to make music. Yvonne let her fingers settle into a simple progression. Tonic, subdominant, unresolved dominant. The chord Michael had never finished. She left it hanging, a question mark vibrating in wood and wire, then stood, turning off the light. Outside, June jacaranda petals swirled in the parking lot thermals, purple against asphalt. She inhaled the scent, part blossom, part sun-baked rubber, and felt the old ache of spectacle tilt finally into peace. The world would keep remixing his legend, chasing her cameo, inventing new spotlights. Let it. Some truths were loud. Others were meant to be carried quietly, like a song without its final chord, fading into the steady rhythm of ordinary footsteps. She walked to her car, keys jangling. Before driving off, she caught her reflection in the side window. No headline glare, just a woman framed by common daylight. She smiled at the simplicity, at the fact of still being, then slid behind the wheel and turned toward home, leaving the last unanswered note to drift, invisible and unbroken, across the city's summer sky.